Hello everyone, I am Dr. Gayathri, Assistant Professor at Smriti College of Pharmaceutical Education, Indore. In our today's video lecture, we will learn about the first component of cell, that is plasma membrane. So in our previous class, we have seen that cell consists of three main components. They are cell membrane, cytoplasm and nucleus. So coming to cell membrane, we know that the cell membrane surrounds the cell and it provides flexibility to the cell, and also it acts as a selective barrier. So it protects the cell from the contents of the cell which are present inside from the external environment, and it also acts as a selective barrier in which it permits the inward and outward flow of material selectively. So coming to the structure of plasma membrane, it is composed of proteins and lipids. So these proteins and lipids are held together by non-covalent forces. So according to the fluid mosaic model is a specific model which is used for describing the structure and function of plasma membrane. So according to this fluid mosaic model, the membrane is a mosaic of proteins floating like icebergs in a lipid bilayer sea. That is nothing but ये जो प्लाज्मा मेम्ब्रेन है उसमें प्रोटीन्स जो है वो लिपिड बाइलेयर पे फ्लोट करते हैं. कैसे? जैसे एक सी में आइसबर्ग्स फ्लोट करते हैं वैसे. सो दैट इज व्हाट फ्लूइड मोजाइक मॉडल सेज, that the membrane is a mosaic of proteins floating like icebergs in a lipid bilayer. So what is this lipid bilayer? It consists of bilayer, that is two layers. So it consists of two layers of phospholipids, and it consists of cholesterol and glycolipids. So coming to the proteins, there are two types of proteins, integral proteins and peripheral proteins. So these integral proteins extend into the lipid bilayer, whereas the peripheral proteins, they associate with the membrane lipids or integral proteins at inner or outer surface of the membrane. So that's why these are called peripheral proteins. So integral protein extend into the lipid bilayer, whereas peripheral proteins, they are attached to the inner or outer surface where they are associated with the membrane lipids or with integral proteins. So many of the integral proteins are glycoproteins. That means they have sugar moieties attached to the end surface on ends attached to the ends that face the extracellular fluid, that is outside the cell. So glycolipids plus glycoproteins together form glycoallics. So this is on the extracellular surface of the cells. Coming to the functions of plasma membrane, the first function of plasma membrane is protection, because it is a membrane of the cell, right? So it protects the cell from injury. Next is barrier. It holds the cell contents. The contents inside the cells are held intactly because a plasma membrane is present. Then holds the shape of the cell. So it anchors the structural elements of cytoskeleton, which provides distinct shape to the cell. So what does that mean? This plasma membrane consists of structural elements which are important for the cytoskeleton, and this provides specific shape to the cells. So next is cell recognition. So glycoproteins and glycolipids, these function as receptors. So receptors for specific chemical signals from outside. So what happens when this occurs? This triggers specific processes within the cell, such as immune responses, etc. So what is the cell recognition function of plasma membrane? Because plasma membrane consists of glycoproteins and glycolipids, and glycoproteins and glycolipids act as receptors. So what are the signals which these receptors receive? They are specific chemical signals. So once the specific chemical signals occur, glycoproteins and glycolipids act as receptors, and this results in triggering of specific processes within the cell. Example is an immune response. Next is cell junctions. What does that mean? Membrane proteins help adjacent cells to form various types of junctions for keeping the cells together during tissue formation. What does that mean? We know that tissues are formed from cells, right? So these the membrane proteins which are present, they are helpful in holding the adjacent cells together. So when that happens, the process of tissue formation happens. Next is microvilli. Microvilli is membrane invagination specialized for increasing the surface area for absorption. Invagination is nothing but the turning of inside out of the plasma membrane. So what happens is microvilli, they help in membrane invagination, which is specialized. Why is this membrane invagination required? It is required because it increases the surface area of the cell for absorption. Coming to the next function of plasma membrane, the next function is impulse transmission. So the nerve impulses in the nerve cells travel through the plasma membrane. So nerve impulses travel through the plasma membrane of nerve cells. Next is cell movement. Movements like undulation. Undulation means smooth movement upward or downward in upward or downward directions. That is called undulation. That is some cells which show undulation are fibroblasts. And then pseudopodia. Pseudopodia is arm-like projection. So the plasma membrane protrudes outside in order to produce arm-like projections which help in movement. So in this kind of movements like undulation and pseudopodia are performed by the plasma membrane. So undulation is seen in cells like fibroblasts and pseudopodia is seen in cells like macrophages. So this kind of movement of the cell is permitted by the cell membrane. Is performed by the cell membrane. Next is enzymes. So we know that there are certain proteins present in the membrane, right? So some of these membrane proteins catalyze biochemical reactions. So that's how they function as enzymes. Next is transport proteins. So what do these do? Many membrane proteins form channels that facilitate the transport of water, ions and nutrients like sugar and amino acids. So we know that the membrane has many proteins. So many of these proteins, first they act as enzymes and they also help in transport of substances such as water, ions and nutrients. Next is selective permeability. We already know that the plasma membrane is a selective barrier. So what does the word permeability mean? Permeability means, the word permeability comes from permeable. Permeable means something is allowed to come inside. So if a substance is called permeable, that means it allows everything to come through it. And if it is said to be impermeable, that means it does not allow anything to pass through it. So if partial permeability, if we say, or selective permeability, if we say, it allows only certain substances to pass through it and it does not allow other substances to pass through it. That means it is permeable only to certain substances and it is impermeable to certain substances. So that action is shown by plasma membrane. Next is bulk transport. So this involves two kinds of processes. One is endocytosis, another is exocytosis. So the word endo itself we can understand that inward. exo means outside, right? So endocytosis means bulk intake of materials from outside by invagination of plasma membrane to form vesicles. So I told you invagination is the inside out turning of the plasma membrane. So through this process what happens is the outside materials are taken inside the cell in the form of vesicles by a process called endocytosis. Next is exocytosis. What does exocytosis mean? It is the reverse process. So through the reverse process what happens? The waste materials and the secretory materials which are present inside the cells are removed outside the cell. So this transport process is happening or is being performed by the plasma membrane. So plasma membrane is involved in bulk transport of materials either inside the cell or outside the cell. If it is taking the materials from outside to inside, the process is called endocytosis. Endo means inside, cytosis means inside the cell. And exocytosis is the substances are being removed from the cell to the outside. So that is either waste products or some secretory materials are removed from the cell by exocytosis process. So this is about the structure and function of plasma membrane. Hope you have understood.